Thank you all for coming. Apologies, we're running a little late. Obviously parking is a bit of a problem around here. This evening's actually being put on by Pittwater Community Alliance. We're an alliance of 14 community organisations in the Pittwater area. And they're made up of Avalon Preservation Association, Avalon Beach Historical Society, Bayview Church Point residents, Bayview Life, Ulgola Beach residents, Clairville, Ulgola Plateau residents, Horseshoe Cove, Mobile residents, Newport Residents Association, Palm Beach and Whale Beach Association, Pittwater Natural Heritage, Scotland Island Residents Association, Warriewood Residents Association and West Community Association. So there's quite a coverage of Pittwater amongst those organisations.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Garigal people, who still live amongst us, along with all other Aboriginal residents of the Northern Beaches, and particularly Pittwater, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We benefit every day from First Nations custodianship over many generations of this beautiful landscape, and I'm grateful for their continuing care within our community. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that landscape is one of the main reasons I've lived in Pittwater for the last 20 years. The first time I came here was in 1980 with my then boyfriend, now husband, to visit his family home. He took me for a walk up Bangowie Headland, looking out to sea, and I couldn't believe how spectacular it was. Eventually we moved here with our two young kids, next door to his parents as they grew older, and we've stayed here ever since. I've always loved Pittwater's natural beauty with its waterways, beaches, bushland and, as the saying goes, low-key villages nestled between them. I'm standing for council because I feel very lucky to live here and a responsibility to play my part in supporting our community as we deal with climate change and pressures for increased development. As most of you will know, I'm a journalist, an activist and a mother. I've always been involved in the community, for example, having helped set up Protect Pittwater, Canopy Keepers and on the Save Mona Vale Hospital Committee. I grew up at Ramsgate, opposite Botany Bay Heads, then studied for my BA at the ANU and later for an MA in journalism at City University of London. I worked as a reporter and feature writer for AAP for many years, and earlier I carried out demographic research at the ANU. As a current Pittwater councillor, I think those who know me, especially my family, would say I work hard for the community. I regard it as a job and treat it as such. I do my best to get through the 2,000 odd pages of council papers before every meeting. Afterwards I write a report from the council chamber about the issues of particular significance to Pittwater residents. But council involves much more than this. By working with the community, I've prevented the loss of 3,613 properties from Pittwater's conservation zones. Perhaps you attended one of the forums I arranged to inform residents, signed the petition, or read about the issue which I endeavoured to publicise. I also worked with Greens MPs and others and advocated with council staff and other councillors on this issue over many months before the Planning Department agreed to maintain our conservation zones intact, and that's the New South Wales Planning Department. I can guarantee if we hadn't made a huge noise about it, we would have lost those properties from those conservation zones. As it turns out, this was an extremely important decision for Pittwater, given the current New South Wales Government's plans to increase density in residential zones. You might also have heard about the tree canopy plan, which I shepherded through council. A motion was passed for that in 2017. There was a plan put out in 2018 on public exhibition, and then the whole thing stalled and nothing was heard about it. Once I got into council, I worked with environmentalists and ecologists, and we eventually got another draft, which was actually a complete rewrite of the original plan that went to council last September, but even then it didn't have any provisions for protection of existing tree canopy. It was very good on the planting new trees in areas that didn't have canopy, which was mainly sort of DY and Brookvale, but it wouldn't have protected our canopy up here. So in the days before the plan went to council last September, I was negotiating furiously with staff to come up with wording that would actually cover the existing canopy. So I was extremely grateful then to win the support of all councillors present that night. Turning to other issues, and I won't spend too long on this because I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants more information, but I actually moved the motion in late 2022 for staff to identify extra road funding. That actually occurred. We actually received a grant for the state government towards road repairs early the next year. I've also supported the retention of public land in Avalon, continuing funding for homelessness, domestic violence and youth services, and upholding a 10% target for affordable housing across the Northern Beaches. Finally, and this goes back to 2017, I fought for the return of Pittwater Council. Whilst I believe we have to work with the current council as it exists, I do still support a return to that smaller council for a variety of reasons. So earlier this year I proposed a motion at council for a poll to be carried out at this council election to see how many residents still want to de-amalgamate. However, I wasn't surprised that the majority of councillors failed to support this, and in fact a Liberal councillor moved an amendment that basically sank the intention of the motion. In recent years, some say due to the merger, Pittwater has faced a rash of oversized developments, in many cases raising trees from one end of the block to another, cutting away whole cliffs. Where previous generations built lightly upon Pittwater's magnificent landscape, preserving the trees, we now have concrete monoliths rising up from below the earth and creating more stormwater runoff. Development Council's new harmonised local environment plan and development control plan, which govern how development occurs on the Northern Beaches, will continue next year, and I'll be working to ensure that they include provisions to prevent the further spread of buildings out of character with Pittwater. In town centres, I think the Patterson's building in Mona Vale, opposite the car park, is a good model at 4 storeys. I would very much like to see our villages retain their current heights, so that in Avalon, for example, you can still see the surrounding tree canopy above the shops. However, I think that the state government will force us to go to 6 storeys in Mona Vale because it's classified as a strategic centre and has several large supermarkets. And the industry standard for this is a floor space of 2,500 square metres. Other village centres, because their supermarkets are smaller than that 2,500 square metres, are likely to escape that increase in height. Although I note the draft LEP currently indicates heights will increase from 8.5 to 9.3 metres in those town centres. To be clear, I don't believe we should be trying to squeeze more people into Sydney as a whole, but should be decentralising and creating smaller viable cities in New South Wales, as you see in US and in Europe, where you have cities of less than 1 million people with major corporations headquartered there. However, we do need to provide housing for young people, downsizers, those with disabilities and essential workers. So in town centres and with the government's proposed increased density in residential zones, I hope that will be possible. Whether it's development or any other issue on council, I will consider it on its merits. Every Greens group is autonomous, so regular council watchers will see I don't automatically vote with the other Greens councillor. I'm certainly not beholden to any developers or lobby groups or tied into block voting. On the budget and any special rate variation, I'm not making any promises. However, I will be circumspect in any decisions that involve increasing rates or fees at a time when we have a cost of living crisis and housing crisis. As some of you will know, I voted against the current budget, largely because of its provision to borrow for a second year running from the Mona Vale Cemetery Fund, an amount totalling $4.6 million. This is an internally restricted fund, and as I said at the time, I think it's unethical borrowing from grieving families who pay into this fund for cemetery upkeep when they bury their loved ones. However, the council is struggling to make ends meet. We've been running down assets built and natural to avoid spending for years now, and some are in urgent need of maintenance. Unfortunately, nearly every council around the state is in that situation, and I think a large part of it is local councils don't get a large enough amount from the tax take across the country. However, with the new council, we'll have an opportunity to examine the council's organisational structure for inefficiencies. As part of that process, I'd like to review what council's work is being outsourced to see if it could be brought in-house at a lower cost. I also believe we might need to sacrifice some areas, such as the big splashy events, to redirect funding to basic infrastructure. Is that it?
Yeah, thank you, Miranda.
Councillor Causey, you're aware, I know, that currently Northern Beaches Council has a survey out for public comment where the bureaucracy has proposed changes to council meeting practice, which includes cutting back on resident input. As a councillor, are you allowed to make a submission to that survey?
Look, I think technically we could, but I don't feel that it's my role to be engaging in that public consultation because I have a voice outside that. I actually wrote to all the residents groups, or a lot of the residents groups anyway that I can think of, when the discussion of the Code of Meeting Practice came up. I'm totally opposed to removing any form of time restriction, like removing the 3 minute, sorry I'm saying the wrong thing, basically shortening the amount of time that anybody, whether a councillor or a resident, is allowed to speak at council. Also, the idea that you wouldn't be allowed to take photographs or film or record in the vicinity of the council, which could mean anything. I think it's extremely inappropriate, especially considering that those sorts of restrictions don't exist even with Parliament. So I'd also note that yesterday the government released a discussion paper about the government's putting out a new model code of meeting practice, and they're asking for submissions on it, so I'd encourage the community to do that. I've also written to the CEO today suggesting that we should actually suspend discussion of the code of meeting practice until that government code of meeting practice is finalised, and then the new council will have an opportunity to decide which way they go.
Thank you. I thought that might be the case. I would hope that all those who've demonstrated here tonight their interest in council process will go online and make a submission before the weekend's out.
Do you have any other questions? Over here. Oh, sorry, right here.
Marina Doug from Trevor Road. Did you bring any figures with you tonight on the council's performance? I understand there's a $5 million debt that the council's carrying.
Look, I haven't brought figures with me. We're basically, the budget is basically on, we're balanced very delicately, shall we say. The budget each year is about $500 million. What's happening is we're eating into our working capital, and that would mean when that gets to a certain point, and I can't remember the figures offhand, it means that we don't have money there in case there's some sort of natural disaster or something happens that urgently needs to be fixed. And so this is one of my concerns about the budget, and why, I think we need to see where we can improve efficiency of spending. But we just know that councils all around the state are struggling. So, and I do believe that if we were a standalone council, we wouldn't have the same level of expenses, because we wouldn't be paying our CEO and our executive as much money. We wouldn't have the same need for that low middle management. But we do have this council, and so we have to deal with it.
Yeah, because the CEO and some of the other members of the structure of the organisation are on fairly heavy salaries, and there seems to be some level of waste in terms of supporting activities that aren't Rose rates of motion. And, you know, I just feel that the council needs to focus on what the core responsibilities of the community are. Also,
Can I just respond to that?
On dogs off leash.
Take it as a comment, I think.
All right, we'll take, fair enough, yep.
We'll take what you said as a comment for a minute. If you've got another question, otherwise we need to
Yeah,
bring
the other comment is dogs off leash. What's your thoughts on providing an area for dogs off leash?
Well, we already have, I think, something like 28 areas for dogs off leash across the northern beaches. At the last council election, the Greens and I, you know, considered this issue very deeply because we knew that there was a push amongst a lot of residents to have off-leash dog areas, and so we said, okay, we'll be guided by the environmental reports. However, once the environmental reports came out, it just, I mean, I had ecologists, environmental scientists coming to me and telling me that the reports were faulty or flawed, and I could read them for myself and could see that, you know, if you do surveys over 4 days, all at the same time of year in January, you'll have no idea what's happening on those beaches at other times, and you'll certainly won't know how dogs are affecting wildlife if you don't have, if you have dogs on the beach when those surveys are being done, which is what the report said. So at this point, as a result of, I guess, you know, discussion with ecologists and I say scientists who are telling me that basically if you have dogs on beaches at any point, their scent means that wildlife won't come up there. And we know that we have a seal colony at Barrenjoey Headland. We have seals coming up at all our beaches at different times of the year. There used to be a group of terns who used to roost up at North Palm Beach, and I know somebody who has photographs of them doing that, and they've now gone because of the number of dogs who are on the beaches all the time these days.
Thank you, Barry. We'll take one last question.
Thank you. Peter Blanchard. I'm the president of Bayview Chess Point Residents Association. I make that point because I'm standing outside of that position, and I'm also a resident of 20 years in Church Point, so I want to address the question, I suppose, from a personal perspective. And you've raised it, you've touched on it, which is to do with, I'm going to call it the secession of Pittwater from the main frame of council. And my question is there any economic modelling anywhere that's been done on that? All I've heard to date is the soft data and the wishes and the wishful thinking and reverting back to the good old days. But what I haven't heard, and I haven't seen any cost modelling on that exercise.
Well, there was modelling done. Brian Halstead from the Demerged New South Wales Alliance is an accountant. He's worked as CFO for major corporations, and he did modelling for a number of the merged councils before COVID, and it showed that the outcomes for financial outcomes, if you had combined the results, or the projected results for the former Pittwater, Warringah and Manly councils, would have been better than the outcomes that Northern Beaches Council was achieving at that point. However, I'd say at this point, I don't see this as a council issue. The state government has made very clear they've passed legislation so that we cannot, unless a majority of councillors on Northern Beaches Council voted for it, the council couldn't put together, can't put a poll up to find out how residents feel about the whole issue. The council would have to put together a business case and then approach the state government, and I can't see the majority of Northern Beaches councillors doing that. I think that we have the same issue that on council we have 6 councillors from the former Pittwater area, and we can be outvoted on any issue by the other 9. And because of the way the voting dynamics work on council, we just simply won't be able to get councillors from outside our area, and even some of them in our area, to support that. So the only way I can see is via a petition or a proposal under the state legislation and thousands of signatures basically.
Okay, thank you very much, Miranda.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Miranda, for your acknowledgement of country. Appreciated. My name is Rowie Dillon and I'm your Northern Beaches Independent Team #1 candidate for Pittwater. I was born in Newport and I lived in Pittwater through to my mid-20s, and I returned to Pittwater 8 years ago, or to Newport actually. I'm the current president of the Newport Chamber of Commerce, and I stand here to be your community voice protecting our future. I think it's really fair that I share my story of how I got here and why I'm running for council. For 22 years I operated a business called Rowie's Cakes, a kitchen that bakes wheat, yeast, gluten and dairy free. I had 3 factories in Alexandria, 45 staff. I'm the author of 2 cookbooks and I used to appear on Studio 10 once a month doing cooking demos. And my clients included Qantas, Virgin, Tiger Air, David Jones, Woolworths, Thomas Ducks and Harris Farm Markets. 18 months prior to COVID, I brought another shareholder into my business. Without going through the intricate details, I've never had COVID by the way, but I'm one of those people that lost everything during COVID. Post-COVID, I baked for local cafes and delis and made pre-prepared meals for people around Newport, Avalon and Mona Vale. I worked in the now closed Mitch and Mark home store, and I started to put all of that coaching energy that I would put into my team into the business community of Newport Village. I worked with council placemaking and created the Newport Spring into Summer celebration, and then I accidentally became the unanimously voted president of the Newport Chamber of Commerce. Bringing the community together, I met with Guy and the president of the Newport Surf Life Saving Club to talk about community. And I mentioned that I had this idea of serving the community my beautiful food for lunch on a Sunday, an Ottolenghi style dining concept where I'd wheel out a bench with a choice of 2 protein, hot vegetable, 3 salads and rigatoni and cheese for the kids, and of course a wonderful dessert. So Rowie's Cakes, or Rowie's by the Sea, was born, allowing people in our communities to enjoy the beautiful view of our surf club and to support it. I guess it was then that I decided that I was meant to be where I am, in our community. I've worked with council and state and federal governments at a grassroots level, creating change and better relationships, including Newport Residents Association, that benefit the community and create community engagement. I'm so proud of my contribution to the community, and I'm also proud of the input and impact that I had on Sophie Scomp's determination to create change and action on the vape reform. I believe that I can make a difference and be a clear voice in council for our beautiful and unique Pittwater. I aim to enhance community services, support local businesses and protect Pittwater's village character. I'm just going to now go through each of those questions individually so you know exactly how I feel. Will you vote independently on all issues? Yes, I will. Are you a ratepayer or a resident of the Pittwater ward? I am a resident of Pittwater, but I'm not a ratepayer. Do you understand and support Pittwater's unique character? Well, of course I do. Pittwater is so unique, with its beaches, waterways, reserves, parklands, endemic flora, its community villages, our differing transport and its unique people. The majority of the people that I speak to are passionate about their Pittwater. It's one of the most beautiful places to live, and we are all very, very lucky to live here. Are you committed to working hard for the community living in Pittwater? Local government, in my eyes, needs a fresh perspective and energy to address the challenges of today. One of my greatest joys is to talk to people of our communities, listen and share their views with others. One of my greatest, I'm committed to listening and looking and learning about the needs and issues in a black and white manner with a beneficial perspective for all of us. Let's face it, for those who know me, I'm a workaholic, so we'll put Pittwater first. What do you believe should be the building height limit for buildings in the Pittwater Village centres? The building height limit for buildings in Pittwater villages differs, and they should be representative of our villages. Majority of Pittwater is zoned low residential. Essentially, there's been no zoning changes since Pittwater Council days, other than being brought into the standardised template wording, which means the highest building height available or allowable is in Mona Vale, which is 13 metres at the corner of Mona Vale and Pittwater roads, with 11 metres in industrial zones, subject to any change by New South Wales Government. The Mona Vale Place Plan is currently on hold, pending further direction from the state government regarding their housing reforms. Newport has heights varying from 8.5 to 11.5 metres along Barrenjoey Road. There are fears that the state government may declare an uplift in building heights in areas that have substantial supermarkets. Anything like this would need to be very careful, very careful consultation, and I'll be here to listen and advocate for the people of Pittwater in all communities and villages. Will you consider matters on their merits and not on political or party grounds? Well, that's how your Northern Beaches independent team works. We consider matters on their merits. Every vote is a conscious vote. We do not have a HQ as such that tells us how to vote. We stay true to our values. Creating a better future together, protecting our environment, putting community first in decision making, supporting and enhancing our local economy, and enhancing our quality of life. Are you beholden to or funded by a developer or lobby group interests? Well, absolutely no. Your Northern Beaches independent team candidates are simply hard-working locals protecting our future. What is your position on the council resorting to having a special rate variation to balance its budget? Once I'm on council and understand council's financial position, as well as understanding council's long-term financial goals in consultation with community and councillors, I'll be able to make a decision on my position in relation to a SRV, special rate variation. But logic is, if costs are rising and income isn't meeting the rising costs, the reality is that something has to give, without affecting services and ratepayers. And whatever gives would have to be financially sustainable for all. Will you be locked into voting regimes? No. As said, I'll vote with conscience. We have shared values and want the best for our communities. How are you allocating your preferences in group preferences? Well, for the Northern Beaches Council election in the ward of Pittwater, we have no preferences. The only ward with preferences is Manly to another independent, Candy Bingham, for Good for Manly. So thank you very much for allowing me to run for council. I'm very honoured.
Thank you, Rowie. We'll have a brief period for questions. Those put up their hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowie. I'm Anna-Maria Monticelli. I'm the Secretary of Protect Pittwater. To the Northern Beaches Independent, in the last council budget, your party voted for a pay rise for councillors and also senior management, while at the same time voted for a rate increase. That was a vote in a block. So how is this fair, and why should we trust your party?
I am not a running councillor at the moment, so I'm actually going to refer you to our Mayor, Sue Hines, on that question, if that's okay with you.
No, we didn't actually vote on a pay rise for councillors. That actually was already something that was voted continuously to happen year on year, because councillors get paid very little, and I think councillors work very hard and deserve the $31,000 a year that they actually get. The management, we don't have anything over, because for only the CEO, so everything else below that is only on structures, so I deny that. But yes, the only vote that went through was to vote through the rate cap. 4.9%. And I don't deny that. And I think for good fiscal management, if council doesn't keep on top of the rising costs, insurance has gone up by 16%, road maintenance has gone up by many different percentages, 4.9% I think is a very fair rate cap.
Thank you, sir.
Another question, anyone else have a question? Oh, okay.
Hello, Robbie. My name's Marcia. I'm from Mobile Residents Association, but this is the question just for me. So for every resident in favour of dogs on beaches, there are equally as many residents opposed to this trial. How do you propose to equally represent the views of those in the community opposed to trialling dogs on beaches?
It's my understanding that a trial will be conducted in Mona Vale after this current election, and that will determine whether or not, and that will be a trial period, and that will determine whether or not Mona Vale and Palm Beach proceed. But it's until that trial is commenced and the findings of that trial have come through that we'll be able to determine the answer.
Hi Rowie, my name's India. I'm an Avalon local. I've grown up in Avalon. I've just got a question for you because I wasn't too clear on your stance on this. So I work as a gardener in Pittwater. I also do bush care volunteering most weekends. Invasive plants are becoming a huge snowballing problem for us. They threaten our bush reserves. It's also a huge issue on private land. And it's increasingly expensive to deal with. What do you see as council's role in the next term in dealing with this problem specifically?
So I'd like to look into that actually, particularly with Lantana, which becomes a lot of an issue, particularly on that Avalon headland there, as you go around the Serpentine at Bilgola. So, and I'm not sure if that's actually included in your tree canopy plan, Miranda, but I think it's something that needs to be looked into because it can be quite dangerous because you can't actually, on that council land, on that headland, particularly at the Serpentine at Bilgola, it's very hard to excavate down towards there. Residents have done it themselves, but on that headland it is council land. So I'd like to look into that.
Thank you, Rowan.
Peter Middleton, Newport. Rory, given at least 40% of our experienced councillors will cease to be part of the council before we even get to the polling booth, the ability to swiftly come to grips with council procedure and keep the council moving will become very important. I have 3 very short questions about council meetings. Of the 17 monthly council meetings since February last year, would you have attended any of those?
I've attended online, probably.
So the live webcast, you listen to a number of those?
Yeah, probably about 5, Pete.
Excellent, thank you. So Pittwater Council used to have 2 council meetings per month. The much larger Northern Beaches Council has only a single monthly council meeting, often with an 800 pages plus agenda, which they often do not get through. Are you in favour of increasing the frequency of council meetings?
I'd be educated by my fellow councillors on that once I get voted into council to understand the amount of paperwork and the workload, but I am of a general understanding of the workload that's involved, and I'm looking forward to the induction process. Thank you.
Close those questions to Roe at the moment.
Thank you, everyone. Must admit, I'm a little unprepared. I didn't realise I was going to be speaking this evening. So you will have to bear with me a little bit. I've been fortunate enough to live in Pittwater for my whole life, pretty much, moving here when I was either 1 or 2. I love our community and the local environment in particular, especially the beaches and bushland. Having spent a lot of time at both growing up and even now. I went to school at Avalon Public and then Barrenjoey High and have been passionate about preserving our area since I was a kid and got involved in politics very early on, handing out before I was 10, I think. Yes, just always been very interested in the betterment of the area and the world more generally. But I do think we live in the best place in the world here, genuinely. But we have to recognise why that is and do everything we can to keep it that way. I'm a lifelong local, as I was saying, an environmentalist and a small business owner. I've got a Cert 3 in Conservation and Ecosystem Management and a Bachelor of Communications from UTS. I run a local eco-gardening business and volunteer for Canopy Keepers, as well as the Australian Association of Bush Regenerators. I'm running because I care a lot about our local environment and I feel that Council hasn't done enough to protect it and enhance it. In particular, I'm passionate about our precious local biodiversity, in particular our bushland reserves, which are the envy of most of the rest of Sydney and indeed probably anywhere in urban Australia. I really want to see more investment in managing and protecting this nature that we have around us, so that in particular, so that the cost of actually properly maintaining them decreases over time rather than what it's doing right now, which is just going up and up and up exponentially. Council must do better to protect and enhance what tree canopy, bushland and endangered species we have left. Running with the Greens because for numerous reasons, but some of the things I think we're hoping to do in the next term is continue to provide leadership on climate action and adaptation. The Greens are the party that has brought climate change to the Australian political scene and to the attention of the public, I think, in the first place, and will continue to do so on council. We really want to make sure that the new LEP is adequately protecting the environment and what heritage we have here, and I think probably a lot of the people in this room are very interested in that as well, and so hopefully we can make sure it does protect our beautiful area here. We really need to improve building and environmental compliance. It's something that we see, I think, particularly up here in Pittwater. You know, buildings that are not built as per the DAs, you know, trees being cut down, poisoned, all sorts of environmental skullduggery around the place. As I was saying before, I think we really need to increase tree management and bush regen funding. Our reserves are getting more and more types of weeds and more density of weeds, and what we're doing right now is not sufficient. And I guess the final point I want to touch on is there's a lot of roads, rates and rubbish you hear around the time of a council election. That's definitely is core business of council, and I think at the time when the council budget is really struggling, we do need to focus on core business, but I do think that the environment and protection of the local environment is absolutely essential core business of council. You know, the reserves that we have around here, the beaches, etc., etc. It's council that's charged with protecting them first and foremost, and I don't think that's happened adequately up till now, and so I hope you vote Green on 14th of September, and we'll make sure, give it our best to make sure that happens.
Well, thank you everybody, and thank you for actually, is this working? Yeah. Good. Otherwise I'll put my teaching voice on and just go without it. I don't particularly like talking about myself, but I feel that I should give you a bit of a potted history so that you know where my principles, thoughts and ideas actually come from. Born and bred in DY, I'm currently writing my father's life story, which he kept diaries, etc, etc. And one of the chapters is he describes the house that he bought in rural DY, the rustic cottage that he bought for £950 using his army discharge pension. Funnily enough, that rustic cottage is still actually there, looking much the same as it was when we lived in it. And our family had that in our house, in our belonging until 2008. So I have actually been part and parcel of this part of the world for a long time. I can't believe actually how long I have actually been here. I have lived in the Northern Beaches all my life. I have left on and off. My first teaching position was in Wagga Wagga High School, so I was down there for several years. I then took an overseas trip. I went over to the UK for 12 months, and I was going to teach when I was there, but I decided not to spend all my money and just look around the country. And that ended up with the most amazing trip, backpacking on the hippie trail. I'm talking about way back then, all the way from UK through Europe, down through Greece, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of those places that you actually can't really get to terribly easily now. And what a fantastic experience that was. I found the most amazing thing about it was that it really opened my eyes to the rest of the world. So rather than being insular peninsula, I've actually been to a lot of places that a lot of people can't get to see these days. And wow, what an experience it was. It also opened up my love for geology. I am a geologist by training. I've got a couple of degrees in geology and environmental science. And I just love this planet that we live on, and that's why I think we really need to preserve everything that we've got in this part of the world. After all of those excitements, further adventure was curbed for a while because I settled down, got married, had 2 children, so that quietened me down for a while. Not forever, but for a while. I taught at Cromer High School for many years and loved every minute of it. I taught senior geology classes, and I used to take my year 11s and 12s, 16, 17-year-old boys and girls, on amazing excursions out to Bathurst and down the south coast. And looking back, I think I'm glad that we actually got back alive sometimes, because we used to scramble down rocks, rocky cliffs, and jump into beaches where there was absolutely not a lifesaver in sight or anything else, camping beside dams out in the middle of nowhere, and you can imagine how 17-year-old boys enjoyed that. So I had to keep awake most of the night checking on what they were doing. One very funny story, actually, I'll tell you quickly because I'll get out of time soon. There was a group of girls there that weren't terribly popular, and one day they came back to their campsite and they couldn't find their tent anywhere. The boys had picked the tent up, run away with it, put it behind the trees somewhere, so we had to run around for hours trying to find the tent that these girls were actually trying to camp in. That was one of the better stories. It was a lot worse than that, I can tell you. Okay, then after teaching at Cromer for some years, the kids were sort of getting a bit older, getting off my hands. I decided I needed a break from teaching, so I went and worked with an organisation, an environmental organisation called Oz Green. It was in DY then, it's now up in Bellingen. It's a non-government organisation and does amazing work around the world with youth leadership, etc. So I worked with them for many years. I did a lot of environmental work with them, both with schools and government and business. We did programs like Kids, Companies and Creeks, you might have heard of, My River, and the Eastern Biodiversity Corridor down the Great Eastern Ranges. So a lot of environmental work there, so I really put my environmental knowledge to good use. What happened then, I stayed with them for a while. Do I have another minute? And in 2001, I was offered an opportunity I couldn't say no to. I was asked if I wanted to do a volunteer program in Timor-Leste for 5 months. Timor at that stage had just come out of its occupation with Indonesia, violent occupation, etc. And I thought, why not? That's certainly something different. The only problem was that was in 2001. Environmental program, a sustainable villages program, and 22 years later I'm still doing my 5 months volunteer in Timor-Leste. So I've been there ever since. Very proudly in 2022 I received a Order of Australia medal for my conservation and environmental work in Timor-Leste. that's down to a lot of people helping me, including David Palmer, who actually came up there and helped plant a few bits and pieces for me back in the years. So I've actually done that, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm still up there. So that means from all of that, the only reason I tell you all that is it shows you that I've got a very, very wide global international experience, and I'm going to bring that experience to your Northern Beaches. I've got a good outlook on what goes on. I've had good times with youth in particular, and that's the sort of stuff that I want to bring back to this part of the world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I must say I've been coming back and talking in this establishment or in the bowling club before this was built since 2007, and can I say most of the faces are still the same. Actually, I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's nice to come back and talk. I'm speaking tonight as a support person because I'm standing number 3 on the ticket. I'm not expecting, unless your Northern Beaches suddenly get 63% of the total vote, that I will get elected to council. But I just want to very briefly basically say why I'm here. I stayed with the Northern Beaches, your Northern Beaches Independence team after finishing with council at the last election, and that's because I believe that we really do need to keep councils local, and we need to keep councils independent. And I wound up being on the selection panel for the candidate selection for who was going to come up, and interestingly, a couple of people came into the interview, and Rowie came in, and I saw Rowie's name, and I thought Newport Chamber of Commerce, and so I knew Rowie before she even turned up, simply because of the work that she did rebuilding the Chamber of Commerce and all of that stuff. All of that stuff with Newport 2026, Newport 2066, I beg your pardon, and the 2106. I can't even get the I can't even get that number right. I was a Newport school teacher for 19 years, and I don't know who was responsible for writing Northern Beaches on there, but I'm sure it was none of my ex-students. But anyway, so Rowie came in, and of course I know that many people in this room know Rowie very well, and you know what an absolute dynamo she is, and how she's and how much she's done for Newport and in rebuilding the Chamber of Commerce, and because she was pretty instrumental about getting the Christmas decorations and all of those things, and they drove that, and that was extended through other parts of the Northern Beaches after that. And of course Judith, who came with this incredible track record and incredible history of being a teacher, being a geologist, being a scientist, and having so much link with youth and things like that, and she was just such an outstanding scientist, and it was just great. So that's really why I'm here. I'm here to support them, and I know that they will be really good, dynamic people working for the community. I'm happy to take questions from things like that, having been a serving councillor. There's one from a Weaver. But I'm prepared to sacrifice whatever time left I've got.
I was wondering, for you as a councillor, what you might see for your Northern Beaches some of the biggest issues going into the new council, as is brought up, things like compliance, building compliance, dogs. Those areas were to be improved. Are they going to be what the range situation is? Just from your experience of being on the council in the past, what you think the biggest challenges going forward are?
So we do building compliance ranges. Building compliance, I mean, one of the big problems for council is that buildings used to, I mean, when councils did building inspections and did compliance and things like that, they actually made a small, it actually was revenue positive. They made a small income from that, going and inspecting buildings. When the exempt from compliance legislation came through, and you could employ a private certifier to come and inspect your house, it winds up that the whole situation turns a negative, because the council then has to go and prosecute people who've defied the building code, and so it becomes, and so that department that used to make a small amount of money for the council has wound up costing the council money. In terms of any other things you want me to go in that area?
Just anything you think might be the greatest issues facing the new councils going forward?
Yeah, there's lots of issues in terms of there's continuous cost shifting in terms of the levy that the council pays, and I'm a little bit out of date in this because I'm 4 years out of council. The levy that paid for bushfire for emergency services has virtually doubled over here. Is that correct? Something, and we actually pay more for our emergency service levy because we've got more SES and Rural Fire Service brigades here, and we provide more of the service, so therefore we pay more for the service levy. I don't know how that one works, but because we have so many volunteers, we wind up paying more to provide services to everyone else.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We'll leave that there, and any other questions we'll try and leave to general forum so you can ask questions.
Yeah, hi, I'd like to address this to Rowie. I'm a long-term Pittwater resident. The Orange people have dominated the council for many years, and as a resident, I found the services, which is the core purpose of council, to be atrocious, and many other residents feel the same way. I won't go into details, but there's a drain outside our place that's been overflowing for years, despite all the complaints. I don't want to go into the Ruskin Road thing, but you know, the community is not listened to, and I assume those trees will be taken down after the election. But just on the issue of the dogs off the leash, I've been walking Palm Beach for 30 years. Every day there's dogs off the leash. Sometimes they're aggressive, you know. Their owners don't give a stuff about it. I've never seen one ranger once in those 30 years. I've never seen anyone brought, you know, by the council, you know, and fined. The poor lifesavers, I go and say, look, you know, there's a couple of dogs up there, on the north end particularly, and they're just running riot. And they said, we can't do anything. We just ring the council, and the few rangers that are for the whole area of the northern beaches, they won't turn up. So how are you going to police the trial, and if it goes into actually effect after that trial, when you can't police it, when it's illegal to have dogs off the leash on the beach, and then you make it legal? That's my question.
So, I think part of the, and correct me Ruth and Sue if I'm wrong here, but from my understanding is that you can't have a particular boundary where the dogs are unleashed. So the trial will determine that, but the trial hasn't been approved to go ahead as yet.
Hi, my name's Ethan. Full disclosure, I'm one of the Greens candidates for another ward. There's just been a story in the Daily Telegraph about half an hour ago that Sonny Singh allegedly removed Rory Amon's endorsement from his electoral material the day before the news broke about the charges. With that in mind, I think that could explain his absence tonight. But I wanted to ask maybe the lead candidates, what have your parties done to ensure candidates have been thoroughly vetted and have the appropriate qualifications to run for council and work with children.
Well, as Ethan knows, the Greens, in the Greens we have a two-stage process that the local group has to carry out. Basically a study, that's the right thing, but anyway, we have to check the credentials and we have, have to get police checks and working with children checks and those sorts of things, which, and then it's then sent to the central party and it has to be, it's not really a central party, but to the party headquarters, and candidates are basically checked again, so yeah, it's two-stage.
So we have a very thorough panel that interviews the candidates with many different questions on many different levels, but we've also got an application that we've got to write what we stand for, who we are, so they can actually have some time to investigate who we are, but a requirement of council is to have a working with children.
I'd like to make a comment on compliance. There's not any no compliance as far as dogs go.
Sorry, we could just need to speak.
It goes to parking, it goes to building sites, it goes to traffic. I believe there is a major shortage of rangers in the beach. Why, I don't know. It's been going on for years. Every time we ask the council for something, there's no money for rangers, there's no money for roads, there's no money for pools, there's no money for footpaths, there's no money for Governor Phillip Park, there's no money to build the walkway from Palm Beach to Wild Beach. Every time we ask for something, there is no money or no resources. And another thing is as far as DAs go. The council are passing DAs with multiple non-compliance. The residents' views are not listened to. There's two types, there's commercial. There's two commercial ones in Palm Beach at the moment that have major non-compliance, and they're passing domestic ones with major non-compliance on the basis of merit. The residents have to be listened to, and they're not being listened to at the moment.
I'll take that basically as a comment, but would any of the council like to comment on being listened to in the future?
Well, I try to listen to residents, go to residents' meetings, I try to answer emails and phone calls as much as I possibly can, and I basically do this as a full-time job, so I do the best I can. But yes, we absolutely have a huge problem with compliance, and we absolutely have a huge problem with the budget, and it's not, I don't think it's an issue with rates. I think it's the way local government is structured. It's basically a plaything with the state government, that we've become an administrative arm of the state government, but they don't fund us properly for all the sorts of services and things that the councils are expected to carry out. But yes, there are things we could do about compliance. So for a start, we could increase the wages of compliance officers, because we know that, I can't remember the numbers offhand, but we know we have a number of vacant positions. It's very hard to recruit them because it's a horrible job. And so you've just got to pay these people more if you want them to do that job. And we also need more compliance officers. Even if we had the full complement, we could use more. We can't have a compliance officer on every street corner, on every beach all the time, but we can also have a communications program, I'd say, not so much education, but the council could be promoting the message about, what is appropriate. It could be actually taking more action against, it could be doing things like we can't actually take private certifiers who are doing dodgy things to court ourselves, but we could be collecting those that we think are dodgy, and we could be taking a list to the Department of Fair Trading and basically encouraging them to take action. And I know that I've had a couple of arborists who are just absolutely frustrated and say that on the northern beaches, basically tree cutters regard us up here as a soft touch compared to places like Coringo Council. So, yeah, there are things like that we can be doing, and I think particularly communications. I think there was a huge problem. One of the local magazines 2 years ago nearly published a story saying that, oh, there's now a trial open on South Mona Vale Beach. And at that point, we suddenly had lots of dogs going out on the beach, you know, off leash and all over the place, and it's progressively got worse and worse. And I don't think the council at any point has actually stood up with our very expensive communications department and sent the message out that actually there's no trial, and actually this is not legal, and we don't expect to have dogs in every beach in the district. Perhaps you have to be doing that with a bit of a carrot and stick sort of approach, but yeah, we're not actually standing up and, you know, basically saying this is what the community expects and this is how we expect it to be done.
I'd just like to talk to you about listening, because that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned as a candidate, that it's really important to listen. I tend to go a million miles an hour, as always, and I'm prepared to listen, I'm prepared to be your community voice, and for me I want to put the residents of Pittwater and the communities first. So thank you.
Excuse me, I've got a question.
My name is Robin Hughes. Can I ask the Northern Beaches Independence people, what would be your attitude if one or more of us, Pittwater residents, requested the seawall to protect our private property? I repeat that, I'm asking what would be your attitude if one or more of us, Pittwater residents, requested a seawall to protect our private beachfront property?
I'll try and answer that because my background is in geology. It's a very, very difficult question, and I hate to say it, but the problem was way back in the 40s or 50s when they built the houses along Pittwater along the beachfront. Anyway, they should never have been built there. That's history, it can't be changed. I know many years ago that Phil Collin, when he was on council, tried to do a buyback. He suggested that every time a house came for sale along the Coleroy beachfront there, they buy it back. It got far too expensive, of course. So it's one of those issues that we are stuck with. It's a major problem. Seawalls don't work. Give it 10 or 20 years